Welcome to the October 2025 TAM customer webinar, and thank you for joining us today. This webinar is organized by Broadcom's VMware TAMs, and it's designed to connect you, our TAM customers, with subject matter experts and provide valuable content to help you maximize your VMware by Broadcom software experience. Before we get into the content, we have a couple of announcements. Our next TAM customer webinar will be on November 6th, where we'll be joined by William Arroyo. He'll be discussing modern infrastructure management and how VCF 9 provides a platform for managing both VMs and Kubernetes clusters. Your TAM can provide that registration link as it becomes available. Also, your interaction during this webinar is very important to us, so please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. And if we can't answer your question during the webinar, please reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. Also, again, at the end of today's session, we'll share a brief 2-question survey to gather your feedback on today's session and ask you for suggestions for future topics. Your input is very valuable to us, and we'd greatly appreciate you taking the time to complete it. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. After a few months, the recording link will be publicly available on the TAM Services YouTube channel. That brings us to today's speakers and topic. We're excited to welcome Brock Peterson, Solutions Architect, and Jared Burns, R&D Applications Engineer, who will be going over a new construct called the VCF Operations Fleet Manager. Brock and Jared, thanks so much for being with us today. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. You can hear me okay, Chris, right?
Yep, can hear you great.
Oh, all right, sounds good. So I'm Brock Peterson. I'll stay on video here for the introduction, but probably jump over to non-video during the prezo. It's a little distracting, but I recognize a bunch of the names in the attendees, almost 200 attendees. That's awesome. So good to see customers that I've covered in the past, customers that I'm covering currently, other VMware or Broadcom TAMs. So those of you that I know on the call know me as an SE. So they used to call us vRealize SEs, RESEs. Now we're specialist solution architects. We're the folks that cover operations and automation and logs and all of those things. So with me on the call is Jared Burns. He's an R&D engineer. Jared and I, oh gosh, Jared, we met, a couple of years ago probably. I likely had a question about operations and went to the engineers. Jared is one of those. So he's got his hands on the product, right? He's doing some of the development work, interfacing with engineers, and has some really deep insight here. So I asked him to join. He's going to be answering questions in the Q&A. So I think y'all are on mute, but feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. And Jared, please stop me if it's something that you think we can answer live, right? So I like these to be, as free form as possible. I have 20, 30 page deck that we're going to run through, and then we're going to do a bit of a demo. So I kind of wish we had a poll in place here, because I am interested in folks that have, say, VCF Operations 9 and or Fleet Manager already up and running. So, if you do and you maybe want to put that in the Q&A, I'm kind of interested just to see if anyone has it deployed, if anyone has actually deployed the VCF Fleet Manager, and what that experience has been like. So with that, I'm going to move on. So we already did intros. We're talking about VCF 9 and specifically the Operations Fleet Manager today. And we're going to dig into the details of Fleet Manager, no question. But, to start, we're going to take a little bit of a step back and talk about VCF, where operations fits within that hierarchy, and really what it is we're talking about here today. So some of the VCF components, right? Compute, storage, and network, ESX, vSAN, and NSX, of course. And then the last two pillars over there, automation and operations, are where VCF Automation, formerly known as RE Automation or VRA, that's where private cloud automation fits in. And then the last one is your private cloud operations, or VCF operations. I sort of just started referring to it as operations, saves us in the event we change the name again. It's operations, VCF operations. And that's really where we're going to focus today. But I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about kind of where it sits within the broader VCF architecture, the broader VCF fleet, as we call it. So that's really what this slide is talking about. So as it pertains to VCF, we have kind of the fleet construct, and then we have an instance construct, right? So a VCF fleet consists of one or more VCF instances. And within that fleet, you have things like management domain components, right? SDDC Manager, vSAN, vCenter, NSX. You have workload domain components, vCenter, NSX. I refer to those generally as management components and core components, just kind of going forward. And then this is important. We have a single VCF operations and a single VCF automation instance in your VCF fleet, right? So we can have external operations instances or external automation instances, but within your VCF fleet itself, you're going to have one-to-one mapping from your fleet to your operations to automation. And as you can see here, kind of adjacent to VCF operations is this box in blue called Fleet Manager. And Fleet Manager is, well, it's doing just that. It's managing the fleet. So it's going to do a bunch of stuff. It's going to do life cycle of not only your management components, but your core components. It's going to do life cycle of vCenter, ESXi. It's going to do some certificate and password adjustment and a bunch of other things. And I'll talk about the appliance itself, what it looks like, and how it manifests within the operations UI here in a little bit. But I think it's important to kind of get the broader picture of what a VCF fleet is, where the fleet manager sits within that fleet, and sort of what it does. So that's VCF at a high level. Now, in VCF 9, we have several appliances. This is by no means comprehensive. We're focusing specifically on Fleet Manager here, but there's three things I think we need to focus on in terms of the Fleet Manager. The first one is VCF Installer. So if anyone on the call is running VCF 5.2 today, or you've had some experience with VCF, you know they used to run this workflow from what we call the Cloud Builder. That is now the VCF Installer. VCF Installer is used for a few different things. You can use it for fresh VCF 9 deployments. You can use it for VCF 5.2 to 9.0 upgrades, or you can use it to what we call converge existing vSphere 9 environments. So this is where you may have a disparate vCenter, Operations 9, Automation 9, and they do all have to, by the way, be at 9 in order to converge them into a VCF 9 instance. So I think of this a little bit like sort of an upgrade, but not really, because much of the work you've already done, and the installer will sort of converge them into a VCF 9 instance itself, and we'll talk about what those upgrades look like. And then finally, the VCF installer will deploy Operations Fleet Manager. So if you were to go out to your support portal right now and look at VMware Cloud Foundation, you'll see all the binaries listed there. Operations Fleet Manager is an OVA. Like you can just click the download and it'll run it up. So Fleet Manager is the second piece here, right? So Fleet Manager itself, it's its own appliance. It replaces the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager. So for those of you on the call, if you were running ASLCM back in the day or vRealize Suite Lifecycle Manager back in the day, you likely did it for a couple of reasons. One, you used it for upgrades, right? So when Operations 8.18 or 8.18.4 came out, you would upgrade it. When Logs 8.18.4 came out, you would upgrade it. Or potentially you were running automation. And as you know, for an automation deployment, that requires the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager as well as VIDM. So a few different places that it's deployed and reasons why. So it's integrated with VCF Operations, and it will do, and I'm talking about Fleet Manager at this point, right? Think ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager here, old days, Fleet Manager over here replaces ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager. It's integrated with VCF Operations. I'll show you how we do that. It'll be integrated by default when we deploy it from the VCF installer, or when we upgrade from Operations 8.18.x to 9.0, you have to deploy the Fleet Manager as well. But you can also integrate it manually. And I had to do this. I borked up my Fleet Manager, so I had to remove it and redeploy. I just redeployed via OVA, went into the admin UNI on Operations, connected it to Fleet Manager. We're up and running. We'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. So it's doing lifecycle management for all of your management components: operations logs, auto, so automation, network, so VERNI, or operations for networks, VIDB, right? So for all of the management components, as well as the core components. So as well as vCenter in ESXi. And one of the highlights, there's always a couple highlights in each new release for me. One of the highlights in this case is that we brought back online binary depots, right? Woo! If you remember back in the day, you could connect ASLCM directly to myvmware.com and download your binaries. So, for example, when 9.0.1 dropped last week, connect, download your binaries, upgrade, you're done in about a half hour. Well, that went away at acquisition time because we lost some of the support portal APIs. It's back in 9.0. It works perfectly. I'm running this in some labs, also using some of the offline methods. So we do have an online method as well as an offline method. So keep that in mind. Now, the second and third use case are certificate management and password management. And the Fleet Manager itself is doing both of those, again, for all of the management components, ops, logs, auto networks, as well as your core components. Now, it's leveraging the SDDC Manager to do some of that for your core components. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Fleet Manager is deployed as part of a fresh VCF deployment. It's deployed as a part of the VCF Operations 9 upgrade. So when 9 dropped, oh gosh, when was it, Jared? July, I think. I didn't read any documentation. I just went out and started downloading OVAs, and I wanted to upgrade to Operations 9 immediately, and I did that via ASLCM, and sort of found out after the fact that you need Fleet Manager binaries to do that as well. So you can load those into ASLCM today, should you be at 8.18 and kind of want to move on, kind of outside of the VCF installer if you want, but I'll show you how to do that later. And then finally, you can also deploy it as an OVA. It is an OVA. It's out on the support portal. If you need to download it and deploy it day 2 and then connect it into VCF Operations via the admin UI, you can do that. Okay, third bullet here, SDDC Manager. So if you're running VCF 5.2 today, you know that SDDC Manager is still a thing, and it still is a thing in VCF 9. It's most of its UI capabilities, cert management, password management, et cetera, are now presented in operations via this fleet management blade over on the left-hand side, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. But Fleet Manager will make API calls to SDDC Manager for certain password management of your core components, right? So think vCenter, ESXi, et cetera. It also will be performing lifecycle management of the core components and certain password management. So before we jump into the Fleet Manager specifically, I just want to step back just a second and kind of talk a little bit about what's new in Operations 9. So VCF 9 and Operations 9. So I've broken it out into 3 different pillars here. One called Fleet Management, the second called Operations Management, and the third called Security Management. So Fleet Management, it's on the left because it's all new, right? It's all new stuff. And within Fleet Management, we have a few different things. Lifecycle Management, I'll go kind of top row, work my way to the bottom. Lifecycle Management, Single Sign-On, and License Management. So Lifecycle Management, we already spoke about, right? Fleet Manager is going to do Lifecycle Management of your your management components. And Fleet Manager will make calls to SDDC Manager to do Lifecycle Management of your core components, vCenter, ESXi. We also have single sign-on. So single sign-on manifest in VCF 9 is this new thing we're calling VIDB, VMware Identity Broker. And, old days we had VIDM, which of course you deployed with ASLCM if you're using automation, for example, or as your identity manager. We now have VIDB. There is no migration path between the two, so keep that in mind. But VIDB allows us to effectively present single sign-on to the entire VCF stack, right? So log into operations via SSO, and you're kind of good to go if you want to start logging into logs or networks or vCenter itself. And VIDB supports, the classic AD, LDAP, Open LDAP providers, as well as some of the new modern providers, OIDC, et cetera. License management. License management changes a little bit in VCF Operations 9. If anybody's running it, you'll know over on that left-hand side, you have a little license management blade. That's what I call those on the left-hand side of the UI. And when you jump into it, you will license and distribute licenses from operations to your vCenters and ESXi hosts. So license management has gotten a little bit more secure. So what I mean by that is you basically go up to your support portal, download an encrypted license file. I believe it's a .lic file. Ingest it into operations. And the old days of, the 16 character key are sort of gone now. You just have a license file, you deploy it, and you can start seeing some usage metrics and then distribute it to all of your vCenters and ESXi hosts. Second row here in fleet management, and these again are presented under the fleet management blade on that left-hand side, are cert management, password management, and configuration drift. So certain password management I tend to lump together because it's really either fleet manager doing that or SDDC manager doing that. And it's doing it for your management components or your core components. As you know, if you're running VCF 5.2 today, you will do that in SDDC manager. Configuration drift it was brought to product in 8.18, and we did configuration drift for vCenters. In 9.0 and beyond, we're now doing configuration drift for vCenters as well as clusters and hosts. And unified tagging is new in 9.0. So tagging, as folks know, we have tags sort of all over the place in vCenter, in operations, NSX manager, et cetera, et cetera. We're trying to unify the tagging and the distribution of tags, deduplication of tags, finding replicas, et cetera. And that'll be shown in operations under the fleet management UI. So that's fleet management. That is pretty much all new stuff in VCF Operations 9. Now, in the middle is operations management, right? This is really the core competency of what VCF Operations has been, right? At its core, it's a data analytics engine, an observability platform, doing things like performance and troubleshooting. That's still there, gets better metrics, better correlation, troubleshooting workbenches there. We can still do all the dashboarding. All those things are there. They're just enhanced a little bit. We are doing some costing and pricing in terms of, say, VRA showback or VCF automation showback. You also have the ability, if you're using Automation Central today, which is our job scheduler within operations, you now have the ability to generate bills on a schedule. So previously, we maybe did this via a dashboard or a report or something like that. But now you actually have the ability to generate a bill. Have a look at Automation Central. If you're not using Automation Central, highly recommend it. It's one of the best features in operations. Right sizing and reclamation, that's a top 3 use case for operations. It's been around for years. We do have a right sizing as well as a capacity engine that tells us when VMs are oversized, when they're undersized. What might you be able to reclaim? Thinking things like powered off VMs or idle VMs or orphan VMDKs, VM snapshots, all of those things. Like I said, top 3 use case for operations. Now, second row, couple newer things here. Integrated operations, meaning really we've integrated RE operations for logs into operations. So on the left-hand side, there used to be a logs blade. Now it's called analyze under infrastructure operations in 9.0. But health and diagnostics is relatively new. So for those of you that were running Skyline back in the day, you knew that was a SaaS service. It went away. We're bringing all of those features, including log assist, by the way, in 9.0 back into operations. So think things like known KBs, recommended KBs, VMSAs, CVEs, exposure to them. And like I just said, log assist, those are new in VCF Operations 9. So it gets a little bit richer, gets a little bit more advanced in terms of being able to generate reports, download the exposures that you might be exposed to. So 9.0 takes kind of a big jump from the 8.18.x. Diagnostics was really started in 8.18.0. It's enhanced a little bit in every dot release. It's gotten to be really, really quite nice in Operations 9. Dashboards and reports, as you know, they're kind of core constructs within operations. Dashboards get a lot of attention because they're the pretty pictures. Remain largely the same. I think tiny change to the scoreboard widget within dashboards. We now have the gauge option, right? Again, woohoo. We've been wanting the gauge option, think mile per hour gauge or something in dashboards forever. I've had feature requests open for years on it. It's here now, so that's fun. Tiny little feature, but it's a good one. Capacity analysis, projections, logs, and alerts and notifications at the bottom. They're largely the same. I mean, we still have Capacity Engine doing some analysis as well as making projections on, cluster capacity, for example, when you might run out, and we can make alerts and notifications on any of those. Alerts and notifications are effectively the same, right? We support webhooks and SNMP, SMTP. REST, I believe, is even still in there as well. So if you're not using alerts and notifications, I highly recommend it. We have lots of examples out on GitHub, on my blog, various places, especially for webhooks. Now, logs at the bottom, and I kind of left this towards the end because if you remember back in the day, gosh, Jared, when did we integrate logs with operations? Was it like 7.5?
Yes, it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a while. So, but our first integration with logs, and like I want to say 7.5, it could have been before that. It was just like an iframe integrate. It was just an iframe embedded into operations that would kind of jump you over. It's now really a rich competency of its own. So if you're running operations 9, you'll go over to the left-hand pane, go to analyze, and what you'll see, there's a new logs UI. So for any of the folks that were previously running log SaaS, many of the ARIA SaaS products back in the day, you'll recognize that analyze blade, and the logs UI looks very similar to that. And we present a couple different options there. One is that you have the ability to not only look at logs, but you have the ability to compare logs, right? So compare, say, logs from today versus yesterday at a certain time period to do some comparison. It also is where we're doing metric comparisons as well as our integration with VERNI, or ARIA Operations for Networks, or VCF Operations for Networks, colloquially called networks. So the logs blade is getting very rich. I feel like the writing is on the wall here, Jared, for logs, that operations and logs are really coming together as one, even though logs still has its own appliances at this point. Finally, over on the right-hand side is security management. So SecOps, event auditing. Event auditing is, user logins, failed logins, and generally you will be required to use operations for logs for that. Compliance checks, so vSphere hardening guides, vSAN hardening guides, NSX hardening guides, as well as things like HIPAA, CIS, STIGs, things like that. So enough with kind of what's new there. That's pretty much the same slide. So I mentioned in versions past, I always have something that's favorite in a version. I want to say 7.5 is the logs integration. 8.0, it was probably, I think Automation Central was introduced in 8.0. 8.18, for example, introduced our ability to create views on multiple object types. If you remember back in the day, you used to have to create supermetrics to do that, right? Say relate ESXi host CPU consumption to a VM where you want to list all the VMs. You had to build supermetrics to do that. That was an 8.18 feature. In 9.0, I have 2 or 3 favorites. The first one really is diagnostics kind of as a whole, because it gives us visibility into your entire environment, right? Meaning KBs, recommended KBs, known KBs, security findings like VMSAs and CVEs. Not only that, but it also links to the KBs and the potential fixes. We've gotten to be quite good with linking KBs as well as information bubbles. Kudos to you guys, Jared. I'm seeing more and more information bubbles, these little kind of eyes, giving us a little bit more detail on what it is we're looking at, right? What is a diagnostics finding? What is a best practice? What does it actually mean? And if you were at Explore or reviewed the keynote, I think Chris Wolf showed, I want to say our intelligent assistant that's on the horizon, right? So our ability to kind of help you out troubleshooting, and our foray into to AI intelligent assistant. But top right here in active findings, you'll notice the log assist link, right? And then when you click on log assist, what it allows you to do, it jumps you down to administration log assist control panel, and it allows you to upload logs to SRs. So this was a function of Skyline back in the day. It's back in VCF Operations 9, and it's a part of infrastructure operations diagnostics findings, and it will require one of these unified cloud proxies, we call them. So unified cloud proxies, think they were introduced in 8.18. They're in product in 9.0, but a unified cloud proxy, and I'll talk about it here in a minute, but it effectively is a cloud proxy, or we're calling them collectors now, Jared, again, aren't we? Is a way for us to collect.
Yeah, the product says cloud proxy still, but when you do the installer, it calls it a collector. So you can go by both names.
Yeah. So if you remember back in the day, we called these remote collectors. Then we went to cloud proxies, and then we were talking about unified cloud proxies. And in product, as you can see in the screenshot, they're still called cloud proxies, but they're also known as collectors. Either way, a unified collector or a unified cloud proxy can collect logs, metrics, and properties, right? So this gets us around having to deploy, say, a forwarding log cluster, for example. You can now ingest logs via a cloud proxy as opposed to requiring a full-blown, 3-node logs cluster. Also gives us the ability to do things like log assist and some various things. Really cool new feature. Second one, again, it's super small and maybe trivial, but customers have been asking for this for years. So if you see top right here, you can see the gauge widget. It just manifests as a part of the scoreboard widget, which gives us, so if you're doing a dashboard and you go into scoreboard, I believe it's called maybe classic and then gauges. So you enable the gauge widget and you have gauges in your dashboard. Small, but sort of a big win. And then third is, this new thing we call the UCP. So if you're in operations, you jump into administration cloud proxies and click add. You can add a cloud proxy. And then over on the right, you'll see there's 2 toggles, one for data persistence and the other one for log assist. So data persistence, and I love that we have information bubbles for these. It's just such a nice touch. If you enable data persistence, that's really just caching. Should you lose connectivity between your cloud proxy and your analytics cluster. I believe we support up to maybe an hour of data, Jared, or I think it's 10 gigs. That threshold has changed over time, but that's what data persistence is. And then log assist allows us to use that cloud proxy to upload bundles to your SR. And then I just put a screenshot down below kind of showing a connection to a vCenter, because you'll notice that there's a log operations stanza at the bottom where you can collect metrics and logs from a collector. This allows you to sort of configure operations for logs from operations, meaning, back in logs, you would have to configure your vSphere integration, and it would sort of jump out to the vCenter, say, collect all of my events and alarms and IDs or tasks and all of my ESXi hosts. You can do that now from operations. So there's a couple of my favorite things, but let's talk about Fleet Manager. Fleet Manager, and this is a lot, this slide is a lot, I understand that, but I think it really helps us sort of see where Fleet Manager sits, what it does, where it sits in the UI, et cetera. So the Fleet Manager itself is sort of depicted in this middle box here, right? It's 4x12 by 50 gig disk. That's what it's deployed as for me. And it sits right above operations in this case, and it presents what we call the fleet management UI in operations. So if you have operations open, go to fleet management and you'll see lifecycle certificates, passwords, et cetera. So again, OVA 4x12 by 50, and its UI is disabled by default. So if you try to log into the UI, it won't let you. There are ways we can get around that if we need to, work with support if you need to do that. But it does have a rich RESTful API, and that API is available via ops and the MPB SDK blade over on the left-hand side of operations. And I believe it's Swagger UI. It's how you'll see passwords, credentials. It's where Locker sits, for example, if you migrate from ASLCM over to Fleet Manager. So I had to use that to access some of my Locker stuff back in the day. So the UI is disabled by default. The Fleet Management UI is what's presented within operations itself. And it does 3 main things: lifecycle, so upgrades, certificates, be it remediation or updates, and the same for passwords, remediation or updates. And I used this sort of architecture slide just to show you what's doing what. So the fleet management UI and operations, when it's doing life cycle for operations or operations for logs or operations for networks, any of your management components, it will use the fleet manager itself. Fleet manager is doing that work. Same sort of thing for certificates, same sort of thing for passwords. If it's doing any of those for your management components, it's running that through Fleet Manager. Now, if we're doing lifecycle or certificates or passwords for your core components, the UI is in Operations Fleet Management, and then Fleet Manager will make API calls out to the SDDC manager to actually perform the work. So there's some orchestration being done here by Fleet Manager, but in the case of, say, vCenter, ESXi upgrades, SDDC manager is doing the work, Fleet Manager and the Fleet Management UI is making the call, doing the orchestration. Same sort of thing for certificates and passwords. And you have the ability to plan upgrades, to schedule upgrades, schedule downloads. It kind of gives us all of the lifecycle management tasks in a single UI. But there's a lot here. Jared, anything that I missed or you might like to expand on this diagram?
No, I think you got it. We got 3 questions we're going to open live at the end.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay, so that's Fleet Manager. That's higher level architecture of where it sits. This is a little bit of a rehash of it, but it's really important to know, right? So up top, management components. At the bottom, core components. Fleet Management is the UI. Fleet Manager is doing the work on the management. SDDC Manager is doing the work on the core. So just a little bit of a review. So this is what it looks like. So this is a screenshot, operations 9.0.1. I did upgrade when 9.0.1 came out last week. Fleet management will be a blade over on the left-hand side under infrastructure operations and workload operations. And it has 6 tiles: identity access, certs, passwords, tags, config drift, and lifecycle. While tags and configuration drift are there, I don't believe we're using Fleet Manager to do any of that work. Correct, Jared?
That's correct.
Okay. So, I mean, they are presented under the Fleet Management UI, but Fleet Manager is not doing any of that orchestration. I think the main 3 really are lifecycle, certs, and passwords. So keep that diagram in mind when you're thinking about fleet management. And again, I'll show this here in a demo, but when you jump into lifecycle, so expand the fleet management blade and you'll go into identity access, certs, passwords, et cetera. You go into lifecycle, you'll see your management components up top, your core components in the middle. And then there's 6 tabs over on the right-hand side: overview, components, tasks, binary management, depot, and settings. The overview it'll give you an overview of what your product components are, right? So you can see in my environment, I have operations deployed. I have operations for logs deployed. I don't have operations for networks, automation, and I'm in the process of deploying VIDB. So I don't have them deployed. They aren't manageable at this point. I can add them, however, when I go to the components tab, and I'll show you that here in a second. And if you kind of work your way across the tabs, you'll notice that we have one called depot configuration, right? So this, for me, is a home run because we now have online depots and we also have support for offline depots. So this is sort of what the depots look like. So when you go to configure your depot in Fleet Manager Lifecycle, there's 2 different methods, and I'll show you in the demo. You have the online depot. That's the easy button. That's the one I'd recommend as long as your operations cluster can see the internet. And all you have to do is download a download token from the Broadcom support portal, ingest that into operations, make the connection, you're off and running, and it really is that easy. I did this last week several times when 9.0.1 came out, trying various tokens. It works perfectly. It's beautiful. There's 2 other ways. One is you can run in kind of a disconnected mode here, where you install the VCF download tool or the VCF DT that has internet access, and then you can sort of stage binaries there. Third way is deploy an internal web server and use that VCF DT to kind of mirror the online depot locally. So you still do have options for dark sites, or should you not have access to the internet, whatever, we have options for you. If you can use the online depot, use the online depot. This is what it looks like. So if you jump over to depot configuration, you'll have two tiles. One will say online, one will say offline. The online depot, just grab your download token, insert it, accept, okay, you're off and running. If you need a offline depot, there's two options. One, web server, other local path, think like /data from the old days, or how you've been doing it since the acquisition. And you can present your binaries that way. And once they're presented, we can start downloading them. And this presents sort of like LCM, right? So the look and the feel here is kind of like ASLCM. So you have your upgrade binaries, you have your patch binaries, you have your install binaries, and you can download any of them, right? So in my environment last week, when 9.0.1 dropped, I downloaded the Fleet Manager 9.0.1 patch, upgraded it via settings, and then I downloaded the 9.0.1 upgrade binaries for operations and logs, because that's all I had in my environment. I could do the same for networks, for automation, etc. So presents a little bit differently for your core components, right? Because you also have SDDC manager updates. But the binaries here, would be SDC, ESX, vCenter, et cetera. You also have an image management tab here for your ESXi images. But the depot settings are very much the same. And we also have proxy settings, should you need a proxy to get to the internet. So, Jared, before I jump into kind of VIDB and some of these other things, anything that I missed on depots that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got it pretty good. There's three ways. You have the online, offline, and then what you used to do, which is upload it directly to the appliance and then move it over. So
okay,
those are the three ways.
Sounds good. All right. I'm trying not to look at the questions here, but I'll get them at the end. So, fleet management, identity, and access. This is VIDB, right? So we were talking about VIDB a little bit earlier. Replaces kind of the functionality of VIDM, and it's our new identity broker, right? Comes in two different ways. One is embedded in vCenter. Second is, I believe, a 3-node external cluster. And it has support for AD, LDAP, Open LDAP, but as well as some more modern identity providers, Entra ID, any SAML2 OIDC type stuff. But once configured, it allows us to kind of log in, out across your VCF estate one time. It seems like a super sort of simple thing, but it really changes the experience. And I should be able to show that in the demo here. But as it sits today, VIDB is embedded in vCenter, or it's its own external cluster. You go ahead and configure it for vCenter, NSX, operations, and automation. And we do not need any sort of collector as it's going to sit on your network. This is what it looks like. So when you jump into Fleet Management, Identity, and Access, you'll select a VCF instance, and then you'll give it your provider. Certs look like this. We've had certs in operations for a bit, right? So if you've been using operations, we've had ESXi host, SSL, TLS certs for quite some time. Same with vCenter. I believe in 8.18, we started bringing in STS and root certs for vCenters via the VIH management pack, which that was a big win. And, I have a bunch of dashboards and views and alerts that sort of help with that. But as you can see in 9.0, we're giving you some management capabilities. So the ability to actually configure a cert authority, to activate auto renewal of your certs, to ingest imported certs, as well as the ability to kind of alert on those certificates. So that's new. It's a lot of work that used to be done in SDDC Manager. The Fleet Manager is orchestrating much of that work at this point. This is what it looks like in product. So if you jump into certificates and you have a VCF environment up and running, you'll see it for your core components as well as your management components. All of my certs are listed here, the type, the expiration, if auto renewal is turned on, if it's not supported, what have you. And then, of course, you can generate alerts on any of these as well. All of this stuff, these are just operations objects. So any dashboard, any view, any alert that we want to make against a certificate, as it were, we can. Same sort of thing for passwords, right? The look, the feel. So these are, what they call the break glass admin passwords. So admin root, admin at local. When are the passwords going to expire? Do I need to update them, or do I need to remediate them? Remediate being, maybe you changed the password in product, you SSH'd in or whatever. And remediation of a password is effectively a sync. So kind of updating Fleet Manager or SDC Manager with the new password. Configuration drift and tags, they're really not a part of fleet management. So I'm going to just briefly cover these. But configuration drift allows you to do configuration drift detection on vCenters and now clusters and ESXi hosts. We have integrations with GitLab and GitHub repos, so you can kind of keep your templates up there, sort of make your declaration there of what you want, ingest those templates, run them against your environment to see what, if anything, has drifted. And tag management, again, it's new in 9.0. It's under the fleet management blade on that left-hand side. It's not using Fleet Manager in this case, but it will allow us to create tags, push them out to targets, import them, assign, unassign, export them via JSON. It's really our first attempt at unifying tag management for the broader VCF estate. So with that, I think I'll jump over to a demo and kind of bounce around here a little bit. What's the time here? 10:45. Okay. Jared, do we want to answer any questions maybe in the meantime, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should start to answer at least 3 questions, and then I'm going to send the rest in writing at the moment.
Okay, sounds good. Just quickly, you can see my operations UI now, right?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, all right, perfect. Let's go through the questions here. So Finbar is asking, how many VCF domains Fleet Manager scale to approximately? Is it tied to a single VCF domain or independent? Jared, do you want that one?
Sure. So we don't base it on VCF instances. We base it on object and metrics counts for operations, and then how many vCenters can connect to automation, and then what is your logs import. So there's 3 major decision factors you come up with. So it's not based on the VCF instance itself. It's actually based on the metrics and numbers that the other 3 major products that run the VCF fleet have. So and we have all those listed on the config max site. So you just kind of have to go through and put it together on like, what do you think your fleet will require for logs, automation, and operations?
Thank you. Robert, next one. Curious about best practices. What's the recommended approach for merging 2 VMware environments into a new clean greenfield setup? So, Jared, I think this would be probably a convergence, right? So if we're talking about the VCF installer, it would be a convergence, assuming we have, say, a vCenter at 9, an operations instance at 9, automation at 9, et cetera, correct?
Correct. So it all depends on what's deployed. So if you have NSX deployed, you would do a convert of you would leave it on 8 and you would bring it in, and then we would do the upgrades with the fleet manager. If you're just a vCenter customer operations, then you would want to take the vCenter to 9 and operations to 9 before you do the convert. And then the second vCenter would come in as either you could import it as a workload domain, or you could just move workloads over depending on which way you want to go.
Yep, makes sense. So that was when there's a few different upgrade paths with VCF installer. 1 is just a fresh deployment. 2 is upgrade to VCF 5.x. 3 is the convergence of disparate existing environments, and it really falls into that category. Thank you, Jared. Okay, John. So log insight prior to 9.x, for more data retention, you had to scale the nodes either up or across. How does that work with proxies regarding data retention? So at this point, John, proxies are really just ingesting the data. Logs 9.0 is still there. There's still an appliance. There's still a logs cluster. So that's where the data will sit. I don't know what that looks like in 9.1 going forward. Jared, I'm not sure if you do or if you can say, but the unified cloud proxies are really just an ingestion mechanism at this point. The data still sits in the kind of adjacent logs cluster. Jared, anything you can say on that regarding roadmap or no?
Nah, at the moment, we're still working through
Okay.
it.
Okay, sounds good. Romu asks, can we integrate Fleet Manager with Vanafi Certificate Manager? Jared?
It doesn't integrate directly. You can build your certificates outside the solution and then import them in. But yeah, we don't integrate directly into that system from operations. We only really integrate right now with Microsoft CA.
Okay. Thank you. Ray asks, so will it monitor alert on K8s, VKS, et cetera, certificates? We'll definitely monitor K8s and VKS. I mean, we have a dedicated management pack for that today. Certificates, I don't know. Jared?
I don't know on that one. I'm still working through that question. I'm thinking about that question, but
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know if at this point.
Okay. All right. Ray, I will take a screenshot here and reach out to you directly on that one. Or if you just want to fire me an email, brock.peterson@broadcom.com with that question, then I can get an answer for us. Thank you. Paul asks, what's the upgrade path for VCF 5.x to 9.x? I believe it's VCF installer can do 5.2 to 9.0 and above. Is that right,
So
Jared?
the installer is not required for VCF upgrades. So it depends on where you're at. If you have operations deployed, you would upgrade operations out of like same process, upgrade operations, and then you go in and you do the same process you do today. You upgrade SDC manager, and then you would go over into operations and finish out the upgrade of the NSX, vCenter, and ESX host. Now, one of the things that comes in 9 that 8 didn't have is that for vCenter in the host clusters, we allow for composite level images, which means you can have hardware that are different hardware and give different images to hardware based on the requirements. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, it's the same process you do today, except for you just upgrade ops out of band. There is no VCF aware mode anymore, so that doesn't count for anything. So if you use it today, once you go to 9, you won't see operations in SDC anymore at all.
Okay, thank you. Janesh asks, can VIDB connect to multiple identity sources like Entra ID and say another LDAP source? Do we support multiples?
Not today in the SSO. You can connect one or the other. At the moment, we don't support multiples.
Okay. Probably a good feature request though, Janesh. I will take that and take a screenshot. I'm going to take that and open a feature request on it, assuming it's not already on the roadmap, and then we'll get to it. Okay, so Brian asks, what does SaltStack SecOps fit in with Fleet Manager, SecOps roadmap? I don't know that it does today. Jared, do you have any insight on that?
Information will come in 9.1. We don't have anything today, but we will have more information on that in 9.1. So our next release next year, we'll have a lot of detail about that then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing more and more about Salt, but it's just not 9.0. So, okay. Second, 2 more. Can we migrate a Fleet Manager from one remote node to a data center? If yes, what is the recommendation? Can we migrate a Fleet Manager? I don't totally follow that question. Jared, do you? Can we migrate a Fleet Manager from one remote node to a data center?
Yeah, I'm not sure the
I don't know
question
what that
there. Maybe we can
means.
follow up and find out what we're looking for there.
Yeah. So Alexandra, can you just send me an email on that? brock.peterson@broadcom.com. I want to get the question answered. I just don't totally follow it. All right. Last question, Nathan. If we converge our federated NSX environment into VCF 9, do we lose lifecycle management capabilities from within ops?
No, because we don't still lifecycle federated NSX managers inside of ops or SDC manager. They're still separate actions. So we won't break that.
Okay, sounds good. That's all of them. There's probably more coming in, but I thought we could go through a little bit of a demo here. It's 10:50, so I don't want to chew up everybody's day here. But you should be able to see my operations UI. As you can see, I am at 9.0.1. As soon as the 9.0.1 binaries dropped last week, I went and got them. So, and this is a live demo, so anything goes haywire, it's my lab. So if you jump into, again, fleet management, life cycle, I have a couple different instances pulling data, right, from vCenter and SQL and MySQL and some other things, but it's just a lab here. So if I jump into life cycle, you'll see my management components here. I have operations, I have logs. Notice they're in their own tile together, right? That's sort of telling. Operations for networks, automation, and VIDB. I'm deploying this one right now, actually. But if you go to manage, what it does is it kind of bumps you over to that components tab. You'll notice the look and feel here is exactly like ASLCM, right? The inventory sync, the adding of nodes, the patches, exports, logs, right? The look and feel is exactly the same, and it'll do that for any of the components that you have here. So components is also how you add a component, right? So if you have Fleet Manager deployed, and maybe you want to deploy logs, which, by the way, you will have to do. VRLI, or RA Operations for Logs 818, does not have a migration path to 9.0. We do have a data migration tool to help move, I want to say, up to 90 days of data. But the recommendation is once VCF 9 is deployed, Fleet Manager is deployed, deploy a fresh instance of logs, start collecting data integrated with operations, and then shut the old one off once you have a decent amount of data. So keep that in mind. There is no migration path for logs. But this is where, you would deploy VIDB, for example, or Verni, or automation, or any of the other components. And, the look, the feel, it's sort of similar to, what it was back in the ASLCM days. And when you do a deployment or a download or something, you get these tasks, right? The tasks are kind of those sine cosine charts, if you remember back in the ASLCM days. But here, for example, VIDB, I can import one that's existing, which, by the way, that works for logs as well. So for logs in 9.0, I deployed from Fleet Manager, worked great, but I also deployed via OVA and then imported it just to see if it worked. Both of them work perfect. Give it a new install, tell it the version you want to install at, which it's recognizing from binary management, deployment type, and you're kind of off and running. I'm not going to do a deployment here, but that's what it looks like. And the tasks are just that. So you probably remember these as jobs or tasks back in the ASLCM days, but you can see the tasks that have completed, that have failed. Here was one where I wanted to download the operations for networks binaries, so I went ahead and downloaded them. It's, again, just kind of that sine cosine visibility. Depot configuration is where we will configure our depots. So if I were to go ahead and disconnect here, you can see I have an online depot availability. I have an offline depot availability. So should you want to configure your online depot, you go out to the support portal, get your download token, go ahead and add it in here, accept it, I accept, click OK, and you're connected, right? It's literally that easy. Should you not want to do that and you need some sort of web server, for example, here I'm just using some internal web server, give it your web server, give it a password, tell it you accept, you're off and running, and now I'm connected to that web server sort of mirroring what the online depot has. Now, once you're connected, you can start downloading binaries, right? So there's very similar to ASLCM back in the day. We have upgrade binaries, you have patch binaries, and you have install binaries, right? So we don't have any upgrade binaries for 9.1, which is why they weren't showing any. But should you want upgrade binaries or patch binaries for 9.0, you can, right? So, if I were to select one of these, I don't want to select that one. Say I want to select this one, go ahead and try to download it. It's going to send a request out to either my web server or the online depot, and it should show as a task. So that task should say, look, I'm going out to your depot, be it online or otherwise, and I'm trying to download this, looks like the Verni 9 binaries, right? So click on progress. It failed for whatever reason. I'm not going to troubleshoot that right now, but that's where the tasks will sit. Now, patch binaries are just that. For example, the Fleet Manager 9.0.1 was a patch binary. So if you remember back in the day, you apply those a little bit differently. So I actually went into Fleet Manager settings. So the settings tab gives you the Fleet Manager settings itself, right? So there's my Fleet Manager, here's my version, patch version, how much storage I have, the name of it, IP, DNS, gateway. Also, this is where you turn on SSH. So if you remember for the operations analytics nodes, you turn SSH on in your admin console. You turn SSH on for your fleet manager here. I had to go in there. I think I borked up some certificate or something. So I wanted to SSH in because, as you know, the UI is not accessible. This is where you enable that. Anyway, when the patch came out, 9.0.1, I went new patch, grabbed 9.0.1 here, applied it. I don't have a patch available for 9.0.1. It's the most recent, so I can't do it. But that was done in, I don't know, 5 minutes maybe. Operations and logs were, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. So I don't have a VCF instance in this lab, so I can't show you that. But the ability to kind of life cycle this way it's really, really nice. Let me now kind of jump over to a different lab to show you some of the other features. All right, so this is one of our showcase labs, and in the showcase lab we have a bunch of stuff. VCF 9, full deployment, right? Management domain, workload domain, operations, automation, SDDC manager, VIDB, the whole thing. So I'm going to log into operations using VCF SSO and just see what that looks like. So see the credentials over on the right-hand side. With the password VMware. By the way, what you're seeing, it's very similar to a hands-on lab. So for those folks that, if you haven't seen VCF 9 or Operations 9 or Fleet Manager or any of these things, if they're all new to you, just go to hands-on labs and take one. So hands-on labs, I think the lease is, I don't know, 4 hours or 6 hours or something. It's really a nice way for you to get familiar with the UI, kind of things that you can or can't do. They are full-blown VCF deployments. Just, Google VMware Hands-On Labs and you can start taking them. So you saw, I just jumped into my operations lab here, right, to show me kind of all of my stuff. So if you're not at 818X or beyond, you can see, diagnostics findings is very nice. This is our replacement for Skyline, all your VMSAs, CVE exposures, as well as known KBs. All of that should be in here, as well as the findings catalog. So if you remember back in the day, we used to have this kind of weird box site with a spreadsheet in it showing you all the findings. They're all in product now, and all of them are listed here. Finally, Log Assist, which is here. This requires a unified cloud proxy, which is fine, but this is where you can actually load up any logs to an SR, which is a big win. But really, kind of what I wanted to show here was, our ability using VCF SSO now to just kind of go wherever we want. So if I jump into VCF SSO, I'm off and running. I'm logged in, right? If I want to jump over to, I don't know, networks, I'm off and running. I'm in. If I want to jump over to, I don't know, maybe a vCenter. I'm in. So, again, this seems sort of simple, right? Maybe even trivial, but it helps the user experience so much in this case. I believe our VCF SSO is just backed by AD LDAP, but that's sort of what it looks like. The last thing I wanted to show, and I'm going to use a different lab for this one. These are some of our daily builds, but is kind of certificate and password management and really kind of what that looks like. So if you jump over to fleet management and go to certificates, you'll see, for all of your core components, you'll see, or management components like fleet manager, networks, operations, et cetera. You'll see the certificates they're using. Are they expired? What type are they? External, non-external? When do they expire? And you have the ability to renew them via a CA or replace them with an imported cert, right? So in this case, you might have some imported cert that you can go ahead and use. And then you can also, of course, configure your CA at the top. Now, that said, there's also, if you go into configurations, sorry, I'm kind of lab hopping here, but just to show you, if you go into configurations and look for alert definitions with cert or certificate or whatever, we have a lot of alerts today that have a certificate expiration or it's about to expire. And, these, of course, will either use symptoms or conditions saying, hey, this is going to expire and this is when it's going to expire. So keep that in mind when you're looking at certificates, specifically vCenter certificates. I have far too many customers that have vCenter issues because a cert expired. That should never happen. We have alerts to tell you, we have notifications that allow you to be notified when you're 30 days out or 60 days out or 90 days out. So explore the alerts and symptoms around those. Same sort of thing for passwords, right? So, again, this is my management environment. If I needed a core environment, I could, but ops for networks, ops, fleet management, what do the passwords look like? Do I need to update it? Do I need to remediate it? Remediation in this case being, did I change my password actually on the appliance itself? And do I want to sync them up? That's actually what remediate means. So that's a lot. We're at the top of the hour. And, I wanted to potentially open it up for conversation, discussion. 60 minutes seems to be sort of the sweet spot when we start losing people. So I thought I would maybe wrap it up there. Jared, anything that I missed or that you wanted to highlight? Any thoughts at all?
No, I think you covered everything that I would have covered.
Okay. Chris,
Looks like we had, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll answer the live questions here. Or Jared, what's let's take the one from Venkata. Hey, Venkata, by the way. Does this password management replace the use of third-party password management tools like CyberArk? Jared, you want that?
No, it does not.
Yeah.
You can use APIs to connect in and reset passwords using a CyberArk.
Nathan, if we convert our I believe you already answered that one, didn't you, Jared?
Yes, I think we answered all the ones that are still in there. We haven't had any new ones come in since last one.
Okay, I'm going to click that as done, Alex, worth to mention that management packs still exist for VCF operations. Yes, yeah, definitely. Actually, a great call out, a feature that I can show that I just didn't have on the list. So management packs, as you know, are packages of things that connect to targets and pull in data, and we have dashboards for them and reports and alerts. So like SQL, for example, that's a management pack. MySQL, that's another management pack. We have one for ServiceNow, et cetera, and you install them. They still exist. Many of them are kind of in product now, right? So like you don't have to install the VIH management pack. You don't have to install the logs management pack. They're all just there. I think one of the great new features that I've been asking for a couple years now is that you now have Marketplace in product. So, you used to have to go out to the Marketplace, download the pack file, upload the pack file, install it, configure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can now do all that in product, right? So if I want the NSX Advanced Load Balancer Management Pack, I just click download, go here, and download it. So it's downloading. As soon as it's available, I can then go ahead and install and configure it, which is kind of cool. A couple other things you'll probably see this Create Management Pack button here. So what that's using is the Management Pack Builder. So for anyone on the call, if you're not familiar with the MPB, we call it the Management Pack Builder. It's its own OVA pre-VCF 9. Now it's built into product, but this allows us to build management packs for potentially solutions that we just don't have one for today. And it uses REST API calls. We also have an SDK for other targets, but it uses REST API surfaces to pull data, pull objects, pull metrics, bring them back into operations, and then present them in dashboards or views or reports. So explore the Management Pack Builder. The APIs and SDKs have gotten a little bit richer as well, right? So everybody knows the Operations API, right? So if you just go to your Operations Suite API. Oops, didn't like that. It'll take you to the Swagger-based API surface for operations, which is invaluable. I use this almost every day, right? Exploring all of your endpoints, all of your methods, how to get them, how not to get them. But it has the same thing for Fleet Management API, for example, right? So remember how I said Fleet Manager doesn't have a UI? This is how you access it. And again, Swagger-based, beautiful. But we also give you some ability to look at MPB as well as the integration SDK, which supports some other languages, and some visibility into the community, right? So the sample exchange, the Broadcom community itself. I have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of things out of my my GitHub repos for dashboards, views, reports, super metrics, blueprints, all of that sort of stuff. So check that out as well. Anything else, Jared or Chris, you want to take folks off mute, or I don't see any outstanding questions.
Yeah, I don't see any either. And thanks for going over the management packs. I think we'll see if any, kind of come in here as I close this out.
Okay.
But
okay.
If that's the case, we'll stop the recording and then maybe open it up. But I figured someone
Okay.
would, ask a question while you're going over the management packs. So with that being said, anyone on the call, if you do have any final questions, please put them in the Q&A as we close out. But Brock and Jared, this is really great content. Thanks for going over this new construct in VCF. It's very helpful, very insightful. And for the attendees, as we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation was recorded and your TAM can make that available to you. Please join us next month when we'll be diving into modern infrastructure management with VCF 9. And we look forward to seeing you for that on November 6th. Thanks for joining, everyone.
See y'all.